Alrighty, hello class. Uh, I'm Alfredo Romero, and I'm going to be doing the Stivers 51 through 65 passage. And this passage is about questioning the death penalty. And this passage, we're going to be basically going over all the ethical standpoints that appear within this passage. So, from the get-go, the two questions that commonly come up that you're going to think about basically the entire time while reading this, and the ones I want to discuss, are: should the death penalty still be used, and should the death penalty be applied to children? Now, these are both pretty ethical questions within law and the nature of society and within the world. So, from the beginning, a lot of people who are religious, so divine theory is one that plays a lot in here, because many people who were actually contesting a person's charges and contesting their sentence to life in prison were actually religious people. And the divine theory in this particular scenario is more or less outlined by the fact that they are just children. Now, you don't really find anything within the divine theory about children that's more of like a Bible standpoint, but if we're going to look at divine theory, many would say no to just sentencing anybody to death, because that is obviously against what God said, and that's obviously against what the lawmaker of their moral code, which is God, and God is perfect in this scenario, and God has said that you should fear evil behavior, because in that way you will become evil too if you follow. Now, since many religious people often believe it to a T, we notice that no matter what scenario it is, they're not going to sentence anybody to death. And that's good or bad, depending on who you are. It depends. Basically, they always say God will save and God will solve their problems for them as long as they have faith. So, we'll move on from that. Natural law. Let's move on to natural law. Natural law is a big idea here, because from the dawn of our country's birth, we got a lot of philosophy of the Constitution and philosophy of the Bill of Rights from Locke and from Hobbes. So in natural law, you hear a lot about Rousseau and you hear a lot about Hobbes. Now, we're not going to go over Locke. Locke's a little bit different, but we're going to go over Hobbes mainly here, because Hobbes always said that people behave as animals and people are naturally evil. They naturally behave in violent ways, which more or less is true or false depending on who you are. So, but going on natural law, to act as animals and do exactly as animals behave. Well, if an animal is hungry, they will go out and go eat. Now, if you're a predator, you'll go out and eat prey. In this particular scenario, that's either hit or miss, because this entire story here is about kids who are committed of the death penalty charge. Now, this death penalty charge is about kids who are between the ages of 12 to 14, and they were arrested for murder. One of them shot his teacher, another beat to death a 6-year-old girl, and the other one slit the throat of a classmate in the boys' restroom at public school. Now, those are all acts of murder. So, to act as animals, in no way is this acting as an animal. In natural law, you will more or less have the ability to obviously fight back, because that is what natural law says, because that is how nature is. But natural law can't really be applied farther than that, because we notice too many fallacies with it, because we have socio standards, we have societal standards. The next one, this one applies in a very niche kind of sense because it's consequentialism, and each action obviously has its own consequence. Now, this is based in society, or this is based on a personal view as well, because consequentialism is each action has its consequence based on the way or value of right and wrong for society. Now, depending on who you are, your ethical egoism could play into this because based on who you are, murder could be good, murder could be bad. Now, in this particular sense, with these particular cases, I would definitely say murder is bad for all of these. Like, this is exactly the descript law textbook based murder. Like, these are just children though, so if we're looking at it as children, each action has its own consequence. Like, what action would a judge take in a consequentialist mindset? Obviously, based on a consequentialist mindset, you would see one of two ways. You would see they would either sentence him to death row, and by the time he's aged, then they would kill him, or you would see them be acquitted because they were not able to come to grips with the fact that he's not actually a murderer, he's just a kid, he acted out in rage, or he acted out under duress, or he acted out because he's mental illness, because he has a mental illness. Now, there is a case in here that a kid was acquitted of his charges because he had a mental illness. Now, in Florida, the other two assigned were death penalties, and both sentenced to death row, and both minors were, the other two minors who were not acquitted were sentenced to death. So knowing that, the consequentialist action was to sign them to death row, and that would be their sentence till the day they die, or till the day their date is up, as they say. And my last viewpoint that I would say is prevalent within this passage is Kantism. Kantism, written by Immanuel Kant, founded by him, basically created by him. Immanuel Kant talked about consistency, fairness, and integrity within the sociological standards of where you live, who you live with, what kind of laws there are, and how to abide said laws. Now, in this sense, Kant would definitely go with integrity over everything. Yes, is the consequentialist mindset weighing the good and bad of what happened? Correct. And consequentialists usually weigh into what can help everyone. Now, Kant is mainly talking about what helps society in total. Future, past, however it may be said, he's basically preserving the integrity of what is our justice system. And in this particular sense, we would apply his integrity standards to that, and these kids would be sentenced to the death penalty as well because they're autonomous. They are free to make their own decisions just like every other human being. They have the rights just like every other human being, except they're just not 18, but they committed the same acts any adult could do, any person could do. Therefore, the integrity of the law states that we are to sentence them to death because that is the appropriate punishment for them. Overall, I think these are the four most prevalent ones. You could say divine theory and Kantism are probably the most prevalent, maybe not as much natural law, but it is easy to see how each one plays into effect. Divine theory, any religious person has always been opposed to the death penalty because obviously murder is wrong and any version of bloodshed is wrong, but we are to turn the other cheek. That is what is stated. Kantism, we always know what that is, upholding the law, upholding your societal standards, and having the integrity to stick to the universality of the law that was applied. Natural law, we know to act like animals, to behave as animals. Now, animals usually behave in the standards of, if I'm hungry, I'm hungry. If I'm not, I'm not. If I'm going to kill prey, I'm going to kill prey. Now, you can't really apply that here because the whole prey sense doesn't really play into effect, but the act of acting like an animal does. Now, what I mean by that is the fact that acting like an animal is why a person killed another person. So take that as you will. Consequentialism, at the end of the day, each action has its consequence. Consequentialism is is a form of being utilitarian, because you are weighing everything from good or bad, but weighing constantly in the good for the betterment of society. So you could say this relates into Kantism, which also relates into being utilitarian, but this is a more specific approach because we are strictly just talking about what the consequences of these children are. So at the end of the day, children are going to be tried as adults, even if they are underage, even if they are under the age of 18. If you commit an act and you are an individual in your act, you should be tried as an adult. And I think most of these laws, most of these ethical theories support that. And I would say divine theory opposes that. Overall, though, within societal standards and within the constraints of America and the supreme law of the land, no matter what age you are, you will be tried as an equal regardless.